This is the Hacking Real Estate Podcast, episode 14.
If you're thinking about investing, just sometimes we can overanalyze and be in bigger pockets forms and just get caught up where we never make a move. We're just researching. Having that team, again, that realtor that specializes in what you want and that mortgage broker that can help you see how you can afford it, just even if it's messy in the beginning, even if it's not like don't knock it out of the park on that first deal, but you have the confidence. I just think I wish I would have bought more properties back in 2010 versus being scared and not doing it. So just do it.
Welcome to the Hacking Real Estate Podcast, where we dive into the stories of seasoned, hands-on, and tech-savvy real estate investors. We'll learn the strategies and tools they use to maximize returns and minimize hassle, all while navigating the rapidly changing real estate market. I'm your co-host, Brandon Hall, and managing partner of Hall CPA, and I'm sitting alongside my co-host, Vikas Gupta, CEO of Azebo. With our combined 15 years of experience in real estate investing and entrepreneurship, we're here to help you up your real estate game. Let's get hacking.
Hi, everyone. On today's episode, we have Julie Aragon, the fearless not your mama's loan officer. She went from accidental house hacker in 2004 to losing it all in the 2008 crash. Now she manages over 25 units in Los Angeles, and she has a team and technology stack in the mortgage brokerage world that leads the industry, and she's ranked among the top 100 mortgage brokers nationwide. Julie, welcome to the show. In your own words, can you tell us your real estate journey?
So it started out, I grew up in Los Angeles, and, very blue collar community. My parents still live in the home I grew up in. And, they owned their home, but it was kind of the thing of you just buy a home, you pay it off. My dad actually never even drove. So my parents are from the town I grew up in. And for us, moving or buying property, we were never taught that. So I got into the real estate space at 20 years old. I was in college and I had a friend of mine who said, you should become a loan officer. And I thought, well, that's a stupid name. What do they do? And then I found out, it was mortgages. And so that got me in the world of real estate. And so, after a couple years, I bought my first property in 2004. And it's been a wild ride.
And that first property, that was the house hacking?
Yes. So I had a client it was December 2004. We were in escrow. They were going to buy this cute little house and they got cold feet. So I looked at the appraisal and I said, this is cute. It was a Spanish style, 3-bedroom, 1 bath. And I wanted to get out of my mama's house. I had a boyfriend. I need to, some space. So I bought the property. And at that time, I had a real estate license because you needed one to do mortgages back then. And I used my commission as part of the down payment. And so out of pocket, it was very little down, just kind of being scrappy and, getting the seller to pay closing costs. And I got in there and put an ad up on Craigslist, found 2 lovely girls to help me pay the mortgage. And it was good. It was a good first step to buying and allowed me to get some appreciation, after a couple of years, early 2000s was still a good market. But then what happened was I started effing up because I didn't have that financial education. So then I did a cash out refi on that property. And then I bought this huge house that I had no business buying at 23. It was had a pool. I think it was 4-bedroom. I think it was nearly 1.3, for a child by this house. So I always say roommates could not save me. That was a terrible idea. And eventually lost everything. And I actually crashed and burned a few years earlier than most people. I was done by 2007, lost it all, short sale foreclosure. But it was a good lesson. I was young. So I learned, what not to do the next time around.
And then you decided to get back into it. That's pretty impressive. How did you get back into the game?
Yeah, so I never left the industry, right? I was always kind of still doing loans. And after a couple tough years of, rebuilding my credit and my self-esteem. And so it took a while. And I actually, if I look back, I probably waited a little bit too long to get back. I didn't buy another property until 2015. And after an event like a foreclosure, you can buy FHA 3 years later. But for me, it was, I had a lot of debt to pay off. And just, kind of getting things back in order. So I really wanted to stockpile a lot of cash. And in the end, I wish I wouldn't have. I wish I would have been bold and read the books, had the I didn't need to wait as long as I did because I missed opportunities and deals in 2011 and 12.
There's one thing you mentioned that I think if you could go into a little bit more detail on might be helpful to folks who are less in the know about the mortgage space. Can you share a little bit more about when you said after a foreclosure you can get an FHA in 3 years?
Yes. So I love FHA financing, especially if your plan is to become a real estate investor and house hack and, keep this property long term. I love buying FHA 3.5% down on a duplex. Now, I know in some areas you can do 3 and 4 unit if it passes, a certain test, but in our area, really it's like duplex, and FHA is a great product because they're a little less judgy on like the lower FICO scores. So if you are coming off of a past event like a bankruptcy or foreclosure, you can get back into the market much sooner on an FHA loan versus a conventional loan. So, and then the 3.5% just makes it a lot easier. 3.5% down, I should say.
Got it. Oh, I thought you were talking about the rate, and I was like, wow, someone's renting 3.5% today.
But yeah, so when I got back in the market, it was a duplex, 3.5% down. And at that time, so, I was allowed to use the rental income on the secondary unit, and that helped me with qualifying. What I wish I would have done is bought in the best area that I could afford. I didn't. I actually bought because, again, I was scared. I didn't want to be poor again, So I was like, I bought in an area that it was affordable, but the schools weren't the best. And it wasn't an area that it would have appreciated, or it didn't appreciate the way if I would have just, had a little bit. Yeah. So that's the thing. Yeah. So I bought that property. And then after that, I hung on to that, refinanced out of that FHA loan, which is great because now the mortgage insurance comes off. And then I held that property probably for 6 or 7 years before doing a 1031. And the beautiful thing about that story is, so that initial down payment in 2015 was $17,000. And then I did a 1031 much later in like 2020. I was able to add value. We bought another duplex in an area closer to the beach. Rental income was better. And it also had more opportunity to like convert and build an ADU. And so now I still have that property, and it's appraised probably like $1 million over. So I have $1 million in equity in that property, but it started, for me in my mind, it started from that 17,000. Like it never would have happened.
So talk to me a little bit about, the shift in mindset of going through 07, 08, and then getting back into real estate. How did you convince yourself that you still wanted to do real estate? And maybe even people around you that watched you go through 07, 08.
Yeah. So I didn't want that big fat primary residence anymore. Like the big fat house. Like I didn't want that anymore. I wanted to have my housing expense in check and something that would appreciate. And at that time also the mortgage business was on, we were doing very well, and I really needed tax deductions. So I think for me, that was kind of like the shift of you're not buying it for you to live in. I was single. And so I had a different mindset of like this, we're going to do this for the next 10, 15 years and then have something to show for it.
And so for my second question, how did your strategy change? So, it sounds like you downsized the primary residence. Are you still buying similar types of properties on the investment side? Or like you just mentioned the ADU piece, like talk to me a little bit about how maybe you would have analyzed a deal before 07 and how you analyze a deal now.
So we're still buying multifamily. So we own 9 multifamily properties, and it's a mix of duplexes, triplexes, and a few 4 units. So the portfolio is a mix of long-term and some short-term. And so for me, the strategy is an appreciation play. We're buying in nice areas, rents are high, schools are good, but some of the properties have long-term tenants. We have one lady that's been in the property 40 years. Her parents, she grew up there. So, but it's 2 blocks from the ocean, and it's like, okay, well, we're not going to kick out old lady. So, but there's an opportunity to create a short-term rental. So then that allows us to have the property cash flow to where we need it to be, and then just let it appreciate.
Interesting. So when you are acquiring property, how are you evaluating the markets that you're getting into?
We are investing in Long Beach. So we're not really going outside of Long Beach. This is where we live. And so that's really all I'm focused on. I know the zip codes I like.
Uh-huh. So okay, so you're in Long Beach because you've been there for a while. You understand the streets, the neighborhoods, the school districts, things like that.
Hmm. Yeah.
If you had to go somewhere else, how would you do it? Like, let's say you couldn't invest in Long Beach anymore. How would you pick a new market? Like, what are the things you kind of mentioned? Some of the things that you'd look for. How would you evaluate a new market?
I would find a great realtor that's invested themselves that markets to other investors. I would try to find as many people that know that market. I feel, I know the financing side and the best way to structure deals, but what areas are up and coming and, where rents are good. And especially because we like the short-term rental of one of the units that have, decent rules and regulations on the short-term rental side. That's what I would focus on.
Yeah, I mean that's good. Right, you're playing to your strengths and you're covering your weaknesses by pulling somebody else in.
If you own rental units but don't want to pay for expensive software, check out Azebo, the smarter way to manage your rental properties. With Azebo, you can automate rent collection, find quality renters, simplify accounting and tax prep, get a bank account designed for real estate investors, and save on rental property insurance. All of these services are free through Azebo. Join thousands of real estate investors who trust Azebo to manage their rental business in one convenient platform. Sign up today at azebo.com/HRE. That's AZIBO.com/HRE.
So if we switch back to the short-term rentals, you mentioned that you create short-term rentals. How are you doing that? Because California has some pretty gnarly short-term rental regulations, right? Like how do you navigate those regulations?
Yeah, so in Long Beach, I don't know about the city of LA, but Long Beach is pretty liberal and we were able to create them one in every multifamily. So
Okay, got it. So you're buying multifamily, you're making one unit a short-term rental. Got it. Do your tenants complain at all about that?
they haven't. Our tenants have been really great. And I think they, because people come from all over the world, they've got stories. And I haven't, thankfully, had any of our long term tenants complain.
Hmm. And so when you have one short-term rental in these multifamily properties, what does that do to your returns?
So it's about 2.5 times the short or the long term rental rate.
Wow. And you're getting that pretty consistently?
Yeah, we're occupied about 80-85% on all 5 units.
Nice. Now I saw recently on Twitter that there's an Airbnb bust coming. Have you heard about that?
I haven't. And Long Beach is great because, people that want to go see LA, Hollywood, but then also want to go to Disneyland. It's very central. And yeah, but I haven't seen that.
Not to scare you, I have an Airbnb too, and I don't think there's a bust coming. But there's a lot of people on Twitter talking about it recently. So yeah, I don't know. I guess we'll see.
And I have options, right? So I can go midterm and go to those traveling nurses, or we can do long term because long term rents will catch up over time. But short term, I can hang on to a property and just let it appreciate.
Why not make the other long-term units, obviously not kicking out the tenants that have been there for a while and that you want to keep, but as those units turn over, it sounds like you can't make them short-term rental because of the regulations. Could you make them midterm rentals though?
Yeah, or we could, but I might do one midterm, but it's definitely more work. We have a property manager for the long-term stuff. The short-term, I run with, the help of Hospitable and all these other tools. So it's not a ton of time, but I don't know. Maybe we also run 2 businesses, so it's kind of like, and I have a 2-year-old, so gotta manage everything.
Oh, wait a second. How do you manage all of that?
I know. It's pretty wild.
What does your tech stack look like on the management side? Because it sounds like you're self-managing everything.
Yes, so we use Hospitable and then really just Hospitable and like Schlage smart locks, and I have a cleaner that's amazing, but that's it. We haven't got into some of there's some short-term rental gurus I follow that got this huge stack, but I right now trying to just run the mortgage business, we're not really digging into a lot of the techie stuff on the short-term side besides Hospitable. Oh, and Price Labs.
Yeah, so you've got Price Labs connected to Hospitable, which then pushes to both Airbnb and VRBO.
We're not on VRBO, but yes. Right now it's just Airbnb.
What do you like most about Hospitable, or what's a feature that you really feel like anybody that's getting into the short-term rental space should be aware of with their tech stack?
Well, I think Hospitable for sure because of all the messaging. Like if I had to do that, and maybe Airbnb's gotten better where some of that messaging can be automated. And with me, I'm very much like a email and marketing nerd. So just the fact that I can create these like custom flows and stuff, I enjoy.
So for somebody that doesn't know what you mean by all the messaging, can you kind of describe how Hospitable works with messaging?
Yeah, so whether, when somebody first does an initial booking, maybe you've approved them to book your place, and then 24 hours later, it's like, oh, hey, saw you didn't book, just those kinds of messages from the first morning, like, I hope you slept like a baby, got to check out this coffee shop. So all of those like warm, fuzzy things, that's what we do with it.
Do you have any of the I forget what they refer to it as, but basically like the messages that go out whenever it receives any sort of keywords like Wi-Fi, for example? Do you have any of those automations set up?
We don't. We actually have it in the messaging. It's like kind of all bulleted out with everything, and then there's a guide, so everything's right there. I know there's some really cool digital guides too. I haven't dug into any of that, but there's so much you can do.
Yeah, I use Hospitable too, and can definitely attest to the messaging aspect. The automation's great. The one thing that I haven't explored, like I said, though, is that there's this whole like other side of Hospitable. At least I don't think I'm misspeaking here. That apparently, if your tenants are like messaging you and they're like, "Hey, HVAC or Wi-Fi," if that's in their message, you can auto send a message back that's like, "Here are the Wi-Fi instructions," or "Here's how to change the temperature," or something like that. So I haven't really played around with that, but
And you know what it would be perfect for is because we have had, I don't know if you had any experience, if you use the Schleg encode. Do you use that for your locks?
I know where you're going with this. I did not do enough research when I was setting all my stuff up. I use Lockly, which is similar, but it doesn't connect. I,
Okay, well, Schleg had a real problem, or whoever Hospitable was using for the API, whatever. So codes weren't being generated. We had two people, middle of the night, one at like 3 a.m., couldn't check in, which is my worst nightmare, and why I say like I don't want to do it, because you don't want people sleeping in their car. And we were looking into that exact thing though. Somebody messages locked out at 1 a.m, and then we have like, here's the instructions for the emergency lockbox that's around the corner. So I did see Hospitable had some like AI thing they just pushed. Maybe that's part of it.
got it. Interesting. That would actually be a really cool automation. Yeah, I haven't had that problem, but I've been doing it all manually. I go set up my locks manually, and then I go and I message them on. I've got a canned message on Hospitable where I add the new code. And every once in a while I see like, oh, you can connect to this specific smart lock and it's all automated. And I'm like, do I want to spend 2 hours replacing all my locks? That's the big question. So really just laziness is keeping me back from fully automating everything. But that's cool. That's really cool.
Yeah.
I would love to switch gears and kind of talk about the mortgage business if you're open for that.
Yeah, sure.
All right. So when did you get into the mortgage business?
2002.
2002. So you went through 07, 08. What was that like?
Oh God. I mean, it was scary. Company I worked for just shut down. And, I remember, I think it was like September, like Fannie Freddie, all of that. We didn't know, there was no lending. We didn't know what was going to happen. It was scary. I had no money, no credit, like terrible credit. It was, yeah.
And today you run a mortgage business, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So what made you decide to get into entrepreneurship?
I think I was born an entrepreneur. I was just bossy, could never, you couldn't tell me what to do. And then as a kid, just kind of that hustle of, I always imagined myself with a briefcase. When I was a kid, I loved mail. So you remember like on the commercials, like call for an informational video about the Bowflex. And I would call the 800 number and my dad would be like, Julie, what are you ordering? Because I loved marketing. I loved packaging. I loved how like it made me feel. So yeah, I always knew I wanted to be in business, but I didn't know what that would be. Right out of college, I would call those ugly yellow signs, like we buy houses. And I remember sitting in a guy's house, like that was teaching young people to go knock on doors and get people to sell their house. And it's like, oh, this feels weird. Let me get out of here. So I tried a couple different things, like some MLM. I think I looked at like prepaid legal and I was like, oh, not really for me. So yeah, when I got in the mortgage business, it really felt like something that I could be good at because I liked solving a problem. And with mortgages, there's so many different things, and you kind of it's like a chess game. You have to think, 5 steps ahead. And especially, when the crash happened, it was like people were scared, right? Because they saw, people that were buying at that time. So really giving them all of the info so they can make a rational decision, not like based on fear or emotion or headlines. And so I liked that I could be a part of that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Very cool. Do you remember what your first job was? I'm just curious.
Yes. It was passing out towels at a tennis club. Because West End Tennis Club in Torrance?
I do.
Yes. So I passed out towels for about a week, and I got fired because I wasn't cheery enough, I guess.
Why do you have to be cheery to pass out towels?
Yeah, I know. I don't think the members liked it very much. Yeah.
That's funny. I always like to ask entrepreneurs what their first job was. I'm always curious. So what do you feel you do in the mortgage business, in your business, that's a little bit different than maybe what you've experienced as an employee? Like what differentiates your business compared to other places that you've worked?
Like I was saying about being kind of like a marketing nerd and really caring about the experience, about everything from when the client first finds us to how we communicate. Especially in the mortgage space, it's very dry. People feel like they have to present themselves in a certain way, just boring language. And with us, we make it fun. We're very good at what we do, but we don't take ourselves too seriously. And I think people appreciate that. We're going to give them the facts, but we're going to do it in a way that they can understand. We're not trying to, talk over them. We make it in really simple terms. And so I think that's what's made us successful.
And do you specialize in investment property loans, or are you doing primary residence, or both?
I do a lot of primary residence. We do have a lot of investors because we've been doing it so long. We have clients that come back, especially now when I talk to my past clients who have a ton of equity in their home, and maybe it's lazy, it's not working for them. And some of them have children that are now coming of age, getting engaged, that kind of thing. So having those conversations of, okay, baby boy just got engaged. Like, what if we can help him buy his first property? You gifting him 3.5% for the FHA. And we talk about, maybe doing short-term rental on that second unit to help them pay for it. So I think the clients appreciate that we are thinking of things that they didn't think of on their own. Like my parents, they just never thought to buy rentals. Like, who does that?
How different or sort of like how differently do you have to think or communicate around the investor side versus the primary residence side? Like, is it less emotional? It feels like it'd be less emotional, but I mean, it perhaps not. I'm just curious.
I don't know if it's less emotional. I do think when I'm talking about investment property, especially like as an investor myself, I have more passion around it because I see how it's changed my life and how my daughter's life is changed, from these decisions. So while it is just a property and they're not going to live there, what it can do for them and their family is emotional. So I like to try to show them all of those things, and especially like in our market in LA, we've got a lot of clients that have high W-2 wages and they're at the highest tax bracket and they don't think there's another way. This is just like, well, this is a gig, I get it's RSU income, but what can you do? And when I show them, well, here's what you can do. And wouldn't it be nice if you could save in these taxes, and then that allows you to buy another property every couple of years? Because then maybe, your spouse doesn't have to work, or it can be a choice, or, these kinds of things. So, yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about financing options? I know that to buy larger deals over the past few years, you've really had to use floating rate debt, bridge loans, that type of thing, like especially if you get into the large multifamily space. So can you talk a little bit about when should somebody use floating rate versus maybe fixed debt? I don't know how much of that you necessarily experience or if you've got an opinion on that, but I'd just be curious from somebody that's in the space.
So I focus on 1 to 4 unit residential. I'm not doing anything above that and, really large deals like that.
I'm trying to ask about the current market conditions with lending. Like, where do you feel we are in the cycle, I guess? Everybody always likes to talk about a big bust. I am personally anti-bust because I don't think we have enough inventory. Demand is stabilized, but the reality is that inventory is at like what, all-time lows or something. So I don't think we have enough inventory to see major price drops or anything. But I'd just be curious to hear from an insider or somebody that's seeing this stuff every single day, like what your thoughts are on the current state of the market.
Yeah, so right now we have 65 pre-approved buyers that are looking for homes and can't find them. Our clients are making offers and they're not always getting accepted because there's a lot of other people. So part of me, maybe the part that wants to buy more properties, wish there would be a bust. I don't see that happening, at least in my market.
And so this 65 pre-approved buyers, roughly how long, maybe you don't have a good feel for this or maybe you don't have data on this, so just tell me if you don't, but so prior to this, I'll call it like insanity that we're experiencing, what is the typical time to go from pre-approval to offer accepted, and what are we looking at now? How has it changed?
So that's kind of hard to answer because it depends on your agent. I've got certain agents that I know, they've got a pre-approved buyer. They're going to get them an escrow like this month because they've got the network, that, they're a hustler, that kind of thing. Yes. And sometimes I have agents and like, oh, I'm going to use this family friend. Like, oh shit, did they do this part-time? Because you need to get somebody that can really, that knows how to get offers accepted, that knows how to have really good terms, that makes your offer stand out. And then working together with a mortgage person that gives that listing agent the confidence to, say, okay, pick us. So it depends. But I would say, during the craziness of 2020 and 2021, we had people that couldn't, we're looking for a year, and then prices continue to go up and, rates were all-time lows. So they were just getting outbid with people that had so much cash that could pay hundreds of thousands over. And, it was kind of sad. Like back then you can get an FHA offer accepted in my market. Now we're seeing them a little bit more, which is nice, but yeah, it was hard for a lot of buyers.
That's fascinating. Go ahead, I guess.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, like, echoing what you said, Julie, on an agent. My wife and I had a fantastic agent, which is how I think we were able to go from let's look at houses to close in 8.5 weeks.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, like I'm in Pasadena. It's still an absolutely bonkers market. The house next door sold in 2 weeks, all cash. The house across the street, 18 offers in 5 days. It's still wild, even with mortgage rates at 6.5, 7.
Everybody keeps saying that, the housing market's going to crash, but the reality is the only way the housing market's going to crash is if we add a flood of inventory to the market. And so then people go like, oh, well, it's all the Airbnbs, like all those people. But it's like, yeah, but even if every single one of the Airbnb people liquidated today, you still would not get back to regular inventory levels. And I don't think that's something people are really wrapping their minds around. And frankly, like it took me, I've been following housing analysts for probably about the past 7 months this year. And I kind of had like a decent understanding of supply and demand and how it all works. But following these guys over the past 7 months has really opened my eyes to just like how weird this market is. Like we just don't have any inventory. And so you're never going to see, I mean, I shouldn't say never, but you're not going to see a crash if there's no inventory, because there's always going to be buyers. If we figure out how to flood the market with inventory for duration, meaning that you do that for a long period of time, not just a one time, all my Airbnbs are liquidating and then next month we're right back to bad inventory. If you can figure out how to do that with duration, i.e. let people develop, which I know is always controversial, but that's the reality. Like if you don't have any new units coming online, your demand will always outpace supply. And that's how you get these unhealthy markets where you got 18 bids going, even if the rates are at 7%. It's crazy.
Yeah. And in these markets, Long Beach, Pasadena, most of the city of Los Angeles, right? Like even if they can build inventory, it's not like there's empty plots of land sitting around. If you want a starter home, if you want a detached single family or duplex, like where's it going to come from, right? Like even if they do bring inventory to market, it's apartments and condos because there's no land left.
Right. So it'll be interesting with the new laws and the ADUs. So my understanding, attached duplex, you can build 2 ADUs on that lot. Well, you can get financing as it stands today. You can get financing on a multifamily with one ADU, but if you do two, you can't. So like, as those rules start changing too, you have to think like, so that's what I'm looking at is if I can find a duplex on a large lot and it's attached, and then, just buy it now. And I don't need to have 400,000 to build it today, but down the road, if Freddie Mac starts changing their guidance where they're like, okay, well, we'll allow these like split lots and all these things that you can do later. Like, I think that's where the money is going to be made, to find the right lots to develop later.
How are they changing because I heard about this ADU law in LA. How are they changing their infrastructure to support that? Like, I can just imagine these neighborhoods that are all single family homes, then all of a sudden these ADUs start popping up. Doesn't that lead to like a lot more congestion, or what's, you guys are local. What's your take on that?
I don't think there's a lot they can do about it, because at the state level, they've kind of clarified, the cities can't hold things up and not make decisions on it. So I think there's gonna be a lot of pissed offs.
Probably, not to cut you off, but probably because they're looking at that inventory issue, right? Because they're just like, we need more inventory.
Yeah.
I think for California to have any future, it needs supply. So I am generally in favor of like anything that's going to make it easier for people to develop and bring supply online. I think from an infrastructure load perspective, maybe it's a forcing function to get, for the state and the cities to get their shit together, right? Like the reality is that it costs, I mean, we're nowhere near as bad as New York, but it costs us like $1 billion to $2 billion to lay down a mile of light rail. Like, it shouldn't cost that much, but it does. But for the amount of money we're investing in light rail, like if we were able to build it at the same efficiency like the French or the Spanish built it at, we would have twice the network. So, and then you look at things like this high-speed rail debacle that was projected to be $30 billion and open in 2018, and now it's looking at $110 billion and probably never going to open. So I think to say that, hey, like we're not going to build housing because we can't figure out how to do the other things, it's like it's sort of going to put the state in a doom loop. Like, I think it has to figure out something. So I'm pro supply, and then hopefully the other stuff gets figured out. But I think like, it's kind of absurd how much it costs to live in these markets.
And rent's not cheap, and I think for me, because I do this every day and I see how people are, their rent is continuing to go up. They feel like how out of control you feel, especially if you have kids in school and you don't know, are you going to be able to stay in that area and stuff. So if I can help somebody see how they can attain home ownership with lower down payment and again, maybe using something like an ADU to subsidize it a little bit to make it more affordable, they're just like, at least they're in control, That's
what I did with my very first. So I after college, I moved up to DC, and I lived in an apartment building for 2.5 years, 3 years, and then bought a 3-unit property, lived in 1 unit and rented out the other 2. And that was one of the best decisions I think I've ever made. I made almost no money actually doing it when it was all said and done. I think I ended up I sold the property, ended up losing $10,000 after closing costs and stuff. But that was multiple years later after I'd stood my business up and it was profitable. Because what it allowed me to do by moving into this triplex and renting out the other 2 units, I cut my monthly living expenses to zero. The other 2 units were covering the mortgage. I had enough cash flow that the mortgage was covered and utilities were covered, and then I didn't have to pay for parking anymore. So my monthly expenses were nil, and that was the point where I was like, it's time to launch this CPA firm that I run today. But I just figured, worst case, I've got 12 months to figure something out because I don't have to pay for my monthly. There's nothing monthly aside from food that I have to pay for at this point. I remember telling my dad I was going to launch this business, and his biggest concern was health insurance. I was like, well, I'm a healthy 25-year-old. I think that's my biggest concern is making this insane career move at 25 years old and hoping that it pays off. But thank you, Dad. But yeah, it just gave me the confidence to do it. And so, to your point, you get a lot of control. And when you especially in a place like LA, I don't know what the metrics look like out there. And this is back in 2016 when the market looked a lot different than it does today. But man, that was an awesome decision. And like I said, like I ended up selling it at some later point. I think I sold it in like 2019 and ended up losing money after closing costs. But what it enabled me to do was incredible throughout the hold period. So yeah, I like that you kind of help people think through, how do I actually get control of the situation? But it's got to be tough out there, because I know you know, a triplex out in your area is like probably what, $2.5–3 million, something crazy.
Yeah, or like one and a half for, yeah, at least.
1.5. Okay. Okay. That's not as bad as I thought. So, Julie, I want to circle back to something that you said a few minutes ago. You said that the great real estate agents are closing deals. How do you identify a great real estate agent? So, if somebody's listening to this and they're like, man, I want to get into the real estate market, and I thought I was priced out of LA, but maybe now I'm going to start looking at some duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes where I can live in one unit and rent out the others. Maybe I'll add an ADU. This all sounds really good. Help me subsidize my monthly cost. Now I got to go find an agent. I've never done this before. So how do I know, let's say I'm interviewing 3 different agents. How do I know who the killers are? How do I know the one that's going to get me that deal?
I would say first you should start getting pre-approved. So you should find a good broker. And then, because you want to know, like, okay, what is it that you're looking for? Is it that single family with an ADU, or are you going to go the duplex or multifamily route? Once you identify that, then either your broker might have good recommendations, or you can look on Zillow. Most realtors are kind of still on Zillow in some form, and it'll show you recently closed transactions. So if you see they've closed deals in your area, they likely have a bunch of other realtors that know them and like them, you know, listing agents on the other side. I would really pay attention to how many deals they're closing a year, that they're not part-timers, and that they're selling properties that are similar to what you approved for.
Okay. Any other like characteristics that you would look out for in terms of responsiveness, communication? Are there any signs that, like, what are some of these other kind of qualitative traits that you should be looking for before locking in with somebody?
Yeah, I feel like you can kind of, I don't know. Like for me, it's my gut. Like I can talk to an agent and see, like, do they know their market? You know, like, do they know what the homes sold for in their area? They really just, you have to be an expert right now. So many people got into the real estate business in the last 5 years. They just weren't experts. So people that I think very local, like, know that market is important. Yeah, that's probably the big one.
Do you recommend like asking about prior deal flow? Is there any way that you can get data on that? Like if I'm just a regular, you know, consumer trying to get into real estate ownership, how can I vet people? Like, how do I know that they have done the deal flow that they claim to do?
So Redfin now shows you, if you're on the listing after it closes, it shows you both agents. So that's nice, because you can kind of, again, Zillow will show you some data too on recently closed. Or if you see, like for us, because I have this buy box of like multifamily in a certain zip code, and I heart everything on Redfin. And then I see, like, oh, who closed that deal? And then I know the investors, or the real estate agents, I should say, that actively cold call property owner. They call me all the time, like, you want to sell? I'm like, no, but what do you got? Like, you know, so looking for agents that are calling for to get listings for the kind of place I want to buy. And then also, like, for us, kind of what I do is, I would say I like properties with self-esteem issues. So because I'll go and heart everything I like if I see a multifamily, and then Redfin will shoot up the notification. I think we bought 2 or 3 properties like this where, like, I hearted something. It might have been like a little bit out of my range, or I wasn't quite ready because we were finishing something up. And then it pops up like fallen out of escrow. And then I swoop on in, figure out what was wrong with it. And right when the seller's like a little bit bruised, and then make my offer. And so that's been really great. Also, I look and see if they're out of towners, like if the listing agent is either out of the area or not really like a player or a property manager. Because then I'm like, okay, they're full-time gigs property management. They're not going to be a fierce negotiator. So then I'll make my offer, and I've been able to negotiate some really good deals.
Very interesting. Did you say properties with self-esteem issues? All right, explain that. I want to know more about that.
So just whether it's, like on the rebound, like they fell out of escrow, maybe the one property we bought where the tenant had been there 40 years, she's accumulated a lot of stuff. There was no interior pictures of the property on the MLS. I'm like, oh, this is a good sign. If you're not showing me the inside, something's wrong with it. So looking for, maybe the people with a lot of cats or a lot of stuff, because people, a lot of people that are buying, they might be buying for their primary residence. And so sometimes they can't look past all the shit. And for us, it's just, there is less emotion about properties that maybe need a little bit of work. Yeah, really that. And then the out of area listing agent is a good one.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Julie. This has been a fantastic episode so far. We have 3 closing questions that we like to ask all of our guests to wrap each episode. So if you're ready, we'll go with question number 1. What is your favorite book? And it doesn't have to be real estate related.
My newest book that I'm so excited to dig into is called Tough Titties by Laura Belgrave. She is my favorite copywriter, and she just came out with a new book about a week ago. And it's just a like coming of age in the 80s and 90s in New York City. And she likes to call it like loser sex in the city. So I really love just good copy and storytelling. So that's a new fave.
Got it. Great. Well, appreciate the recommendation. And it's good to get sort of a change up from the self-help and finance books we've been hearing a lot about. Good going into the summer as well. Question number 2, you've touched on this. You've touched on appreciation, but our sort of question is, what do you prioritize in your real estate investing? Cash flow, or what do you think is most important? Cash flow or appreciation?
Yeah, for me, definitely appreciation. I have a business, a job now. I don't need the income to live on. And if I know, a property is going to appreciate, let's say in LA, 6%, for me, in my mind, I know, okay, it's going to double every 12 years. So like, I just do the math, and that will always outpace any cash flow I could get.
Great. And then question number 3, is there any other advice or anything else you'd like to share with the audience that you haven't had a chance to yet?
If you're thinking about investing, just sometimes we can like overanalyze and like be in bigger pockets forms and just like get caught up where we never make a move. We're just like researching. Having that team, again, that realtor that specializes in what you want, and that mortgage broker that can help you see how you can afford it. Just even if it's messy in the beginning, even if it's not like don't knock it out of the park on that first deal, but you have like the confidence. I just think like, I wish I would have bought more properties back in 2010 versus being scared and not doing it. So just do it.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Julie. It's been fantastic having you on the show.
Thank you.